You have done everything the lists told you to do. The pills, the powders, the careful evening routine, all of it arranged on the counter like small promises to yourself. And still, somewhere, just behind the eyes, a current keeps running that will not switch off, even though your body is so tired it aches. There is a name for that particular state, the tired but wired hum that supplements alone rarely seem to quiet. It is not a flaw in your willpower or proof that nothing works for you. It points instead toward something quieter and more fundamental, a single mineral threaded through the chemistry of your nervous system. Why should something so small have anything to do with whether the body finally lets go? Here is the part most people never hear. The issue is often not how much you are adding, but whether one ordinary mineral is present to let the brain ease off the accelerator at all. Welcome to Sleepy Science. Tonight, we follow that mineral inward, toward the place where an overfiring nervous system is gently allowed to stand down, where rest stops being something you chase and becomes something the body remembers how to do. So let the weight of the day sink a little deeper into where you lie. Picture a quieting mineral moving softly through tired nerves, loosening the wired feeling thread by thread. Welcome to Sleepy Science. One question travels with us into the dark tonight. How could something this simple reshape the way you sleep and the way your mind settles? That is where we begin. Tonight, beneath everything we will explore, one quiet question waits in the dark. How can a single mineral, so small your body holds only about an ounce of it, quietly reshape the way you sleep and the way your mind settles? That mineral is magnesium. It is the fourth most abundant mineral in the human body, woven into your bones, your muscles, and the soft electrical hum of your nervous system. Most of it is hidden, locked inside cells and skeleton, far from where a blood test usually looks. Researchers describe it as a silent partner in nearly everything the body does. We will not answer the question yet. We will simply follow it, gently, into the night. Magnesium is, at its heart, a metal, a soft, silvery element forged long ago, inside dying stars and scattered across the early universe. On Earth, it became woven into rock, soil, seawater, and eventually into living things. In your body, it does not sit still like a stone. It carries a small positive charge, and that charge lets it bind, fold, and steady the delicate machinery of your cells. Scientists in 2026 still describe magnesium as one of biology's great stabilizers, a quiet counterweight that keeps reactions from running too fast or too hot. It is ancient and ordinary, and yet without it, the careful chemistry that lets you rest could not hold its shape. Inside a single cell, magnesium works as what biochemists call a cofactor, a helper that other molecules cannot work without. Enzymes are the tiny tools that build, break, and rearrange the substances of life, and many of them simply do not function until magnesium settles into place beside them. Research over the past several years has counted magnesium as a required partner in more than 600 separate enzyme reactions, and a participant in hundreds more. Think of it as the small, steady hand that lets 1,000 instruments stay in tune. It asks for no attention. It rarely makes headlines. And yet, quietly, it is present in nearly every process that keeps you alive and breathing in the dark. One of magnesium's most important partnerships is with the molecule that powers you, ATP, often called the energy currency of the cell. ATP carries the spark that muscles, nerves, and the brain spend with every movement and every thought. But here is something studies make clear. ATP is almost never used alone. It works in its active form, bound to magnesium, as magnesium ATP. Without that mineral wrapped around it, the energy molecule cannot release its charge cleanly. So every heartbeat, every slow breath you are taking now, every small repair happening in your tissues tonight quietly depends on magnesium standing beside your energy. The fuel of life, it turns out, needs a partner to be spent at all. Magnesium also helps guard the blueprint of who you are. Inside the nucleus of nearly every cell lies your DNA, the long, folded thread carrying the instructions for building and maintaining your body. The enzymes that copy DNA, that read it, and that repair its small daily damage rely on magnesium to hold their shape and aim their chemistry precisely. Researchers describe the mineral as stabilizing the very structure of the genetic strand, smoothing the electrical tension along its backbone. So even now, while you rest, countless quiet repairs are unfolding inside you, and magnesium is there, steadying the hands that mend the code. It is a strange comfort that something so small helps keep the deepest part of you intact. Magnesium is what scientists call an electrolyte, a mineral that carries an electric charge once dissolved in the body's fluids. Alongside sodium, potassium, and calcium, it helps shape the faint voltages that ripple through your nerves and muscles. These charged minerals do not act alone, they balance one another. A quiet committee deciding when a cell should fire and when it should rest. Magnesium's particular role leans toward calm. Where some minerals push a cell toward excitation, magnesium tends to hold the line, slowing the rush. Studies of cellular electricity describe it as a gatekeeper at the cell's edge. In the soft arithmetic of charge and stillness, magnesium is often the one whispering, "Not yet." Calcium and magnesium are partners that pull in opposite directions, and their balance shapes much of how the body moves and rests. Calcium tends to signal action. It floods into cells to trigger a muscle to contract, a nerve to fire, a process to begin. Magnesium, often does the gentler work of answering, helping the cell release, relax, and reset afterward. Researchers sometimes describe calcium as the accelerator and magnesium as the brake. Neither is good or bad. The body needs both, swinging between them like breath itself. But when magnesium runs low, the braking softens, and the accelerator presses a little longer than it should. The result is a body that finds it harder to come fully to rest. Your muscles know this balance intimately. Every time a muscle contracts, calcium rushes in to grip the tiny fibers. Every time it relaxes, magnesium helps usher that calcium back out and let the fibers loosen. This quiet exchange happens countless times a day, in the large muscles of your legs and the small ones around your eyes. When magnesium is plentiful, relaxation comes smoothly. When it is scarce, muscles can stay slightly tense, twitch, or cramp, as if they have forgotten how to let go. Studies link low magnesium with restless legs and nighttime cramping for some people. There is something tender in that image, a body trying to release, waiting for the mineral that tells it the holding is over. The heart is a muscle that never fully rests, and magnesium helps keep its rhythm steady. With each beat, electrical signals sweep across the heart, telling it when to contract and when to pause. Magnesium helps regulate the channels that carry those signals, smoothing the pulse and guarding against rhythms that race or stumble. Cardiologists have long noted that magnesium levels and heart steadiness travel together, and recent reviews continue to describe the mineral as quietly cardioprotective for many people. As you lie here, your heart is keeping its slow, faithful time, and magnesium is among the unseen things, helping it stay even. The same calm it brings to a single cell, it offers, beat by beat, to the engine at your center. Magnesium reaches deep into the brain, the most electrically active organ you have. Your brain runs on a constant interplay of signals, some that excite a neuron into firing, others that quiet it back down. Magnesium sits at the heart of that balance, helping temper the excitatory rush so the system does not run away with itself. Neuroscientists studying the brain's chemistry describe it as essential to keeping neural activity within a calm, sustainable range. Without enough of it, the brain's signaling can tilt toward overexcitement, a low electrical restlessness that is hard to name but easy to feel. The mineral that steadies a muscle, it turns out, also helps steady a thought, smoothing the space between one moment and the next. So a pattern begins to surface, quietly, beneath these first facts. Magnesium keeps appearing in the same role, not as the spark, but as the thing that lets the spark settle. In the cell, the muscle, the heart, the nerve, it is the steadying counterweight, the brake, the quiet partner of rest. The question we opened starts to shift its shape. Perhaps a single mineral can change your sleep, not by adding something new, but by restoring a balance the body has always known. We are still far from an answer, but the path forward is becoming clearer. Magnesium's story, it seems, is less about energy and more about the gentle art of letting go. To understand why magnesium matters for calm, it helps to picture a resting neuron. Even at rest, a nerve cell holds a small electrical tension across its membrane, ready to fire. Magnesium ions sit near the cell's gateways, gently influencing which signals get through. They help keep the resting state stable, so a neuron does not fire at the slightest disturbance. Researchers describe magnesium as raising the threshold a neuron must cross before it activates, making it a little harder to startle. In a brain rich with magnesium, signals pass in an orderly way. In one running low, the threshold drops, and neurons grow quicker to fire. The difference, felt from the inside, is the difference between a settled mind and a jumpy one. There is a particular doorway in the brain where magnesium does some of its most important work. A receptor called the NMDA, a receptor. It is one of the main channels for excitatory signaling, deeply involved in learning, memory, and alertness. What makes it remarkable is that magnesium physically sits inside this channel, like a small plug, blocking it until the signal is strong and meaningful enough to push the mineral aside. In this way, magnesium acts as a gentle filter on excitation, keeping the channel from opening to every passing whisper of activity. We will return to this doorway later, when the night deepens. For now, simply notice a single ion, resting in a single channel, helps decide how loud the inner world becomes. Why does the body's relationship with magnesium matter so much for rest? Because the nervous system has two broad settings, and magnesium leans toward one of them. There is the sympathetic state, alert, ready, the familiar fight or flight posture. And there is the parasympathetic state, the slowing, softening, rest and digest mode, where sleep becomes possible. Studies suggest magnesium supports the shift toward that calmer setting, helping quiet the stress signaling that keeps the body braced. The question we are following bends a little further here. Perhaps magnesium changes your sleep, not by sedating you, but by helping your nervous system remember how to stand down. It does not force rest. It opens the door that lets rest arrive on its own. Magnesium also touches the body's stress chemistry directly. When you face pressure, your body releases stress hormones, chief among them, cortisol, which sharpens alertness and prepares you to respond. Research has found that magnesium helps modulate this stress response, gently restraining the cascade so it does not run longer or louder than needed. In studies, lower magnesium tends to travel with a more reactive stress system, quicker to rise and slower to settle. There is a quiet logic to it. the same mineral that steadies a neuron, also helps steady the chemistry of feeling overwhelmed. As you rest tonight, that slow restraint is part of why the day's edge can begin, finally, to dull and soften around you. Here lies one of magnesium's quiet difficulties. Stress and magnesium are caught in a loop. When you are stressed, your body uses and loses magnesium more quickly. Some is excreted through the kidneys as the stress response runs, and as magnesium fails, the body's stress signaling becomes a little harder to calm, which can mean still more magnesium spent. Researchers describe this as a depletion cycle, a slow spiral that can leave the most stressed among us also the most depleted. It is not a moral failing or a sign of weakness. It is simple chemistry. But understanding it softens something. The wired feeling you may know so well is, in part, a body running low on the very thing that helps it rest. Magnesium is, in truth, quietly hard to keep enough of in the modern world. The story begins in the soil. Modern farming, erosion, and intensive cropping have, over decades, lowered the magnesium content of many soils, which means the plants grown in them can carry less of it than they once did. Nutrition researchers have tracked a gradual decline in the mineral density of some common crops across the last half-century. So, even a plate of vegetables may offer a little less magnesium than the same plate offered a generation ago. None of this is cause for alarm. It is simply context, a quiet reason why so many people, eating ordinary food, drift toward the lower end of magnesium without ever knowing why. Processing thins the supply further. When whole grains are refined into white flour, much of the magnesium, concentrated in the parts that are stripped away, is lost along the way. The same is true for many heavily processed foods, where the mineral quietly disappears during manufacturing. Studies of modern diets find that magnesium intake often falls short of recommended levels. This is true for a meaningful share of people, especially where processed and convenience foods are common. Again, this is not a verdict on anyone's choices. It is the texture of how food is made today. The mineral that helps the body rest has, in many places, been gently engineered out of the everyday meal, without anyone deciding it should be so. Certain ordinary parts of modern life can lower magnesium too. Heavy sweating, frequent, strenuous activity, and large amounts of caffeine or alcohol can all increase how much magnesium the body loses. Some common medications, used for entirely good reasons, can also affect how magnesium is absorbed or retained, which is one reason it is always wise to talk with a doctor before changing anything, rather than guessing. None of these facts ask you to worry. They simply explain why magnesium can quietly run low even in someone eating reasonably well. The picture that emerges is gentle and human. The mineral of calm is easy to spend, easy to lose, and easy to overlook, woven into the very habits of a busy life. Magnesium deficiency is also hard to see, which is part of why it goes unnoticed. Most of the body's magnesium lives inside cells and bone, while only a tiny fraction floats in the blood. A standard blood test mostly measures that small floating fraction, so levels can read as normal even when the deeper stores have quietly thinned. Researchers have described this as a hidden shortfall, present in more people than blood work alone would suggest. This is not meant to alarm, only to illuminate. It explains a familiar mystery: how a person can feel persistently tense and tired, do everything seemingly right, and still find no obvious cause. Some shortfalls do not announce themselves. They simply shape how the days feel. And so we arrive at a feeling many people know without a name for it. Wired but tired. It is the state of lying down, truly exhausted, the body heavy and aching for rest, while the nervous system refuses to power down. The mind keeps humming. The thoughts keep circling. The body feels braced, as if waiting for something that never comes. Sleep researchers recognize this as a kind of mismatch: physical fatigue paired with nervous system arousal that will not release. It is one of the most quietly frustrating experiences there is. Wanting rest with your whole being, and finding the door held shut from the inside. If you have ever lived this, you already know the texture of tonight's question. Now the question we began with turns and shows a new face. We started by asking how one small mineral could reshape your sleep. But beneath these 20-some facts, a different shape has emerged. Magnesium, again and again, has been the body's quiet brake, the thing that lets a fired cell settle, a braced muscle release, an alarmed nervous system stand down. So perhaps the wired but tired feeling is not a flaw in you, and not a failure of effort. Perhaps it is, in part, a body missing the very mineral that signals the holding can stop. We are not at the answer yet, but the path now points somewhere unexpected. Not toward doing more, but toward restoring a quiet that was always meant to be there. It helps to know that the body is remarkably good at protecting its magnesium when it can. The kidneys, those patient filters, work to hold magnesium back when stores grow thin, reclaiming it from the fluid they process, rather than letting it slip away. This careful conservation is one reason severe deficiency is uncommon, even when intake is low. Researchers describe the kidney as the body's master regulator of magnesium balance, constantly adjusting how much to keep and how much to release. There is something reassuring in this. Even when life runs the mineral low, the body is quietly working to guard what remains, a slow, unseen tending, happening even now, asking nothing of you as you lie here and let the night carry you. Magnesium moves through the body on long, patient cycles. It is absorbed slowly in the gut, drawn into the blood, delivered to cells and bone, and gradually released again as the body's needs shift. The skeleton, in particular, acts as a vast reservoir, holding more than half of the body's magnesium and lending it back to the bloodstream when supplies elsewhere fall. Scientists describe bone as a quiet bank of minerals, steadying the whole system over time. So magnesium is never quite still. It is always in slow motion, given and reclaimed, stored and spent. The rhythm of it is unhurried, almost tidal, a fitting companion for the slow descent into rest that your own body is beginning to make right now. Across these first facts, a clear pattern has settled into place. Magnesium is the body's quiet, steadier partner to energy, guardian of the genetic code, brake to the racing cell, gatekeeper at the nerve's electric edge. It is common to run low on it, in a world of thinned soils, refined foods, and busy, stressful days. And that quiet shortfall may be one hidden thread behind the wired but tired nights so many people know. But we have only mapped the territory, not crossed it. The deeper question remains open. How, exactly, does this one mineral reach into the sleeping brain and turn the excitement down, that mechanism? The true heart of tonight is where the next part of our journey begins. You're still here with us, and that quiet means everything. A gentle subscribe helps another restless mind find their way to this kind of stillness. Let's take a slow breath together now, one sleepy soul at a time. The magnesium already resting in your nervous system, the magnesium we have been describing all this while, is doing its quiet work behind your closed eyes right now. Not because you direct it, but because that is simply what it does. It is sitting in the channels of your neurons, softening the edge of every signal, raising the threshold a little, making each thought slower to startle. The question we left open, how a mineral reaches into the sleeping brain and turns the noise down, is happening in you. In this breath, in the faint loosening of your shoulders, your jaw, the space behind your eyes. What comes next moves closer to that doorway, where magnesium decides how loud the inner world becomes. Let the breath go. To understand how magnesium quiets the brain, it helps to picture a single neuron deciding whether to fire. That decision rests on a delicate balance between signals that excite and signals that calm. The brain's main calming messenger is a molecule called GABA, short for gamma-aminobutyric acid. When GABA reaches a neuron, it gently lowers that cell's readiness to fire, like easing a foot off an accelerator. Research describes GABA as the nervous system's primary brake, and one of the quiet helpers that allows this brake to work smoothly, studies suggest, is the mineral we have been following all along. Magnesium sits close to where calm begins. A GABA receptor can be imagined as a small doorway on the surface of a neuron. When GABA settles into that doorway, the door opens just enough to let a soft inward current flow, and the neuron grows a little less excitable. As a personal reflection, it resembles a window opened to let cool evening air settle a warm room. Neuroscience research has observed that magnesium appears to interact with these receptor sites in ways that support their calming activity. Magnesium does not shout over the system. It seems to help the quieting doorways do what they already know how to do, a little more easily. Now picture the other side of the balance. The signals that wake a neuron up. The brain's main excitatory messenger is a molecule called glutamate, and it works through receivers known as NMDA receptors. When glutamate arrives, these receptors can let charged particles rush inward, raising the neuron's urge to fire. Glutamate is essential for learning and attention during the day. But in the quiet hours, too much excitation can keep the mind humming. This is where magnesium enters the story in its most studied role, sitting at the very mouth of these excitatory channels. As research has carefully described over many years, magnesium's relationship with the NMDA receptor is one of the most elegant pieces of cellular biology. Studies have shown that a magnesium ion can rest inside the opening of an NMDA receptor like a small, soft cork. While it sits there, it partly blocks the channel, limiting how much excitatory current can pour through. The receptor still works, but its responses are tempered, less likely to overfire from minor noise. As a gentle reflection, magnesium behaves less like an off switch and more like a steady hand resting on a door, keeping it from swinging wide at every passing draft of stimulation. This blocking action is described as voltage dependent, which is a quieter idea than it sounds. When a neuron is calm and at rest, the magnesium ion stays nestled in the NMDA channel, holding back excess excitation. Only when a strong, genuine signal arrives does the magnesium step aside to let learning happen. Researchers find this graceful. Magnesium does not silence the brain. It filters it. It allows meaningful signals through while softening the constant background chatter. For a tired nervous system that feels switched on for no clear reason, this filtering role is part of why magnesium has drawn such close scientific attention. Consider what may happen when magnesium runs low. With less magnesium available to rest in those NMDA channels, research suggests the excitatory doorways can open more freely than they should. Glutamate signals that would normally be gently filtered may pass through with less restraint. The result, studies describe, is a nervous system tilted slightly toward excitation, a brain that finds it harder to settle even when the body is clearly tired. This is a measured, general observation, not a diagnosis. Yet it offers a calm, mechanical picture of that familiar wired feeling and why a single mineral has become such a quiet point of interest. The overfiring neuron is worth picturing slowly. When excitatory channels stay too open, a neuron may keep sending signals in rapid succession. like a bell that will not stop ringing after it has been struck. Across a network of neurons, this can feel, from the inside, like thoughts that loop and a mind that resists stillness. Research into magnesium's role suggests that, by supporting the brake and tempering the accelerator at once, the mineral helps neurons return to a slower, quieter baseline. As a reflection, it is the difference between a room full of voices and a room where the voices gradually agree to soften. Step back, and the central question begins to look different. We started by asking how a simple mineral could change sleep and brain health so deeply. Now the answer is taking shape, not as magic, but as position. Magnesium seems to sit at exactly the points where the brain chooses between firing and resting, easing the calming doorways open and keeping the excitatory ones from swinging too wide. The mineral does not impose calm from outside. It appears to support a balance the nervous system is always trying to find on its own. What remains is to see how that balance gently lowers the whole body toward rest. The calming influence of magnesium does not stay locked inside single neurons. It ripples outward into the nervous system as a whole. The body runs on two broad settings, one that readies us for action and one that allows us to rest and recover, often called the parasympathetic state. Research has observed that adequate magnesium is associated with a nervous system that can shift more easily toward that restful setting. By helping temper excitatory signaling, magnesium appears to make it easier for the body to step out of high alert. As a soft reflection, it is like a tide, quietly turning from rising to falling. Magnesium also touches the messengers that carry alarm through the body. Stress hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol prepare us to respond to challenge, raising heart rate and sharpening focus. Studies suggest that magnesium plays a role in keeping this stress response measured rather than runaway, supporting the systems that bring those hormones back down once a challenge has passed. When magnesium is plentiful, research describes a stress response that rises and settles more smoothly. For a body that feels braced long after the day is over, this gentle modulating role is part of why magnesium and calm are so often mentioned together. There is a tender detail in this relationship worth holding lightly. Stress itself, research has observed, can increase the amount of magnesium the body releases and loses. So a person under steady pressure may quietly draw down their own magnesium over time, which can make the nervous system a little more excitable, which can make stress feel a little sharper. As a reflection, it is a loop that can tighten gently in the wrong direction. Understanding this loop is not cause for worry tonight. It is simply a calm reminder of why this mineral sits so close to the feeling of being unable to switch off. When the nervous system settles, the body follows in quiet, measurable ways. As excitatory signaling softens and the restful state takes hold, heart rate tends to ease, breathing slows, and muscles release tension they had been holding without notice. Research connects adequate magnesium with these signs of a body lowering its guard. Magnesium is also involved in how muscles relax after they contract, which is part of why it is so often associated with physical ease. As a personal reflection, it is the sensation of shoulders dropping a half-inch. You did not know they had been raised. All of this unfolds without any conscious effort from the person resting. You do not have to direct a magnesium ion to settle into an NMDA channel, or instruct GABA to find its doorway. These processes run on their own chemistry, quietly, in the background of every still moment. Research describes a nervous system that is constantly seeking its own balance, and magnesium, as one of the steady participants in that search. As a gentle reflection, much of what calms us was never something we had to do. It was something the body already knew, waiting only for the conditions to be quiet enough to begin. Something in you has loosened since we began naming these small doorways and channels. Notice it for a moment, without needing to name it yourself. The signals that kept the mind humming earlier have a little more space between them now. The way the room has grown quieter than when you first lay down. Let one slow breath move through you. There is nothing left to switch off here. The chemistry that settles a nervous system is already at work, asking nothing of you, and we'll keep drifting through it together, gently, fact by fact. It is worth pausing on what magnesium does not do, because the science is careful here. Magnesium does not sedate the brain or shut it down the way a heavy switch might. Research describes its action as supportive and balancing rather than forceful. It helps the calming systems work and keeps the exciting systems from overreaching, but it leaves the brain fully capable of waking, thinking, and responding. As a reflection, this is a quieter kind of help than we often imagine. It is not a wall lowered over the mind, but a gentle settling of the ground the mind already rests upon. Bringing this arc together, a picture emerges of magnesium as a kind of gatekeeper standing between excitation and rest. At the calming GABA doorways, it helps the break engage. At the excitatory NMDA channels, it rests like a soft cork, keeping the accelerator from sticking open. Around the whole nervous system, it supports the shift toward the restful state and helps the stress response rise and fall in measured time. Because magnesium needs are individual and supplementation is a personal matter. This is a good place to mention that talking with a doctor is always the gentle, sensible step before changing anything. Tonight, simply rest with the picture. Once magnesium has quieted the overfiring neuron, something larger begins to take shape across the whole night. The architecture of sleep itself. Sleep is not one flat state. It moves in cycles, descending from light stages down into the slow, heavy waves of deep sleep, then rising again toward dreaming. Researchers studying these stages have observed that magnesium status appears linked to how much time the body spends in the deepest, most restorative phase. When the mineral is plentiful, The descent into those slow waves tends to come more easily and hold a little longer. It is as if magnesium helps the night find its full depth, rather than skimming along its surface. The deepest part of that descent is called slow wave sleep, named for the long, rolling electrical waves that sweep across the resting brain. These waves are slow by nature, far slower than the quick, busy rhythms of a waking mind. During slow wave sleep, the body lowers its temperature, steadies its breathing, and begins much of its physical repair. Studies have observed that older adults, who often have lower magnesium levels, also tend to spend less time in this deep phase. Whether the two are directly connected is still being explored, and the picture is not yet complete. Picture those waves moving through you now, unhurried and wide, like swells crossing a calm and open sea. Magnesium also seems to touch the very beginning of sleep, the quiet stretch between lying down and actually drifting off, which scientists call sleep onset latency. For many people, that gap is where the night feels most fragile. The body is tired, yet the mind keeps circling. Some studies have observed that people with healthier magnesium status report falling asleep a little sooner, with fewer of those long, restless openings. This fits the mechanism explored earlier, where magnesium helps lower excitatory signaling. Researchers note the effect is gentle and varies from person to person. There is comfort in knowing the doorway into sleep has a chemistry of its own, quietly working. Inside the brain sits a tiny structure called the pineal gland, and each night it performs a quiet kind of alchemy, turning the day's signals into melatonin, the hormone that tells the body darkness has arrived. Magnesium plays a supporting role in this process, acting as a cofactor in several of the enzymatic steps that build melatonin from its precursors. Research suggests that when magnesium is scarce, this production line can run less smoothly, which may subtly shift the body's sense of timing. The science here is still maturing, and no single mineral controls the whole clock. Melatonin is less a switch than a tide, rising gently as the light fades from the world. Melatonin does not force sleep so much as invite it. As darkness falls and the pineal gland releases melatonin, the hormone signals to the body that the day is closing, lowering core temperature and softening alertness. Studies have observed that magnesium and melatonin appear to work alongside each other, each supporting the body's nightly wind-down in its own way. This is why researchers often describe sleep not as a single mechanism, but as a quiet conversation among many minerals, hormones, and rhythms all leaning in the same direction. Imagine your inner clock loosening its grip on the day, the way a hand slowly opens to let something go. By now, a pattern has been quietly forming across everything we have followed tonight. We began by asking why a single mineral could reshape sleep and the brain at all. Now the answer is starting to turn. Magnesium may matter less because it does any one forceful thing, and more, because it is woven into so many small steps that let the body stand down from alertness. The deeper question is not whether magnesium helps, but what happens when the very stress that wears us out also drains the mineral that helps us recover. That is the loop the next stretch of the night moves into. The story is shifting from a mineral to a relationship. That relationship runs through the body's stress system, often called the HPA axis, a chain linking the brain to the adrenal glands above the kidneys. When we face pressure, this axis releases cortisol, the hormone that keeps us alert and ready. Cortisol is not the enemy. It follows a natural daily rhythm, high in the morning and low at night. Research has observed that magnesium appears to help keep this system in balance, restraining an overactive stress response. When magnesium runs low, studies suggest the axis can become more reactive. It is the difference between a system that knows how to rest and one that stays braced long after the day is done. Cortisol and sleep are meant to move in opposite directions. As night arrives, cortisol should fall, clearing the way for melatonin and deep rest. But when the stress system stays switched on, cortisol can remain elevated into the evening, leaving the body wired even as it longs for sleep, the very feeling so many people know too well. Studies have observed that adequate magnesium is associated with a calmer cortisol curve at night. Researchers are still mapping exactly how strong this link is, and individual results differ widely. This is the science behind that familiar ache of lying down, exhausted, and finding the mind still standing guard. Here is where the loop closes on itself. Stress raises cortisol, and elevated cortisol appears to increase how much magnesium the body loses through the kidneys. Yet magnesium is one of the very minerals that helps calm the stress response in the first place. So stress can lower magnesium, and lower magnesium can leave the body more vulnerable to stress, a quiet circle that can feed itself over time. Research describes this as a self-reinforcing relationship, though the strength of it varies by person and remains under study. It is not a flaw in the body so much as a loop that simply needs somewhere gentle to begin unwinding. What you just heard, that stress and magnesium can pull each other in a slow circle, each draining the other, is not only a story about chemistry. You may be carrying that circle right now. The braced feeling of a body that stayed alert too long, tired and wired at once. Notice where that tightness lives in you tonight. Perhaps the jaw, the shoulders, somewhere behind the breath. You do not need to solve it. You only need to let it be loosened, the way magnesium loosens its grip on an overfiring nerve. Feel your breath move once, slowly, all the way out. The loop does not have to keep turning. It has already begun to ease. There is a tender truth at the heart of this loop, and it reframes the whole night. The very state that depletes magnesium chronic stress. The wired exhaustion of a nervous system that cannot stand down is also the state most in need of magnesium's calming reach. Research suggests this is part of why simply being tired is not always enough to bring sleep. The body can be depleted of the very thing that helps it let go. This is not a reason for worry, but for understanding. Knowing the loop exists is itself a kind of loosening, because what once felt like failure begins to look like ordinary biology. Magnesium does more than quiet the nervous system. Researchers have found it helps the brain grow and reshape itself. One molecule at the center of this is called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, sometimes described as fertilizer for neurons. Studies have observed that when magnesium levels are adequate, BDNF signaling tends to run more smoothly, supporting the survival of existing brain cells and the formation of new connections between them. When magnesium runs low, that signaling often appears blunted in animal research. It is a gentle reminder that the same mineral helping you relax tonight may also be helping your brain quietly tend its own architecture. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to rewire itself, to strengthen connections that are used and let go of those that are not. Magnesium sits close to the heart of this process. The receptors that decide whether a connection grows stronger, the NMDA receptors, depend on magnesium to keep their gait balanced. Research suggests that when magnesium is plentiful, these receptors respond with more precision, allowing meaningful experiences to leave their mark without the system becoming overexcited. There is something quietly beautiful in the idea that a single mineral helps your brain decide what to keep and what to release into the dark. A specialized form, called magnesium L-threonate, has drawn attention in recent neuroscience because of how it behaves near the brain. Most forms of magnesium have trouble crossing the blood-brain barrier, the careful filter that protects neural tissue. L-threonate appears in laboratory studies to raise magnesium levels within the brain's own fluid more readily than other forms. Researchers exploring memory and learning have used it specifically for this reason. It is described here descriptively, not as a recommendation. If you ever consider any supplement form, that is a conversation to have gently with a doctor who knows your history. Memory is not stored like a file on a shelf. It is built and rebuilt through changing connections between neurons, a process called long-term potentiation. Magnesium influences this process at its foundation. Studies in animals have observed that raising magnesium levels in the brain can increase the density of synapses, the tiny junctions where memories take shape. More synapses, in this research, were associated with stronger learning and recall. It is a soft thought to drift toward, that the quiet mineral in leafy greens may be among the materials your mind uses to hold what matters to you. The hippocampus is the brain's mapmaker for memory, a curved seahorse-shaped structure deep within each hemisphere. It is especially sensitive to magnesium. Research has found that this region carries a high density of the magnesium-dependent NMDA, receptors involved in forming new memories. When magnesium is scarce, studies suggest this delicate machinery can become either underactive, in stressful states, overexcited. Either extreme tends to interfere with clear memory formation. The hippocampus is also one of the regions most affected by chronic stress, which quietly ties together the threads of mineral, memory, and the calm you may be settling into now. Aging brains and magnesium have a relationship that researchers continue to study with care. Older adults often show lower magnesium status, partly because absorption tends to decline with age, and partly because the kidneys release more of it. Some observational studies have noted associations between higher dietary magnesium and better preservation of brain volume in later life, particularly in regions tied to memory. These are associations, not proof of cause, and scientists are careful to say so. Still, it adds a gentle weight to the simple act of eating well across a lifetime, the slow tending of a mind over decades.